welcome you back to eradiosports.com. I'm your host, Elissa Campbell, and the lights are certainly shining very bright. That's because the 2013 NBA playoffs are underway, and we're going to take time to survey the landscape and how so many of the storylines continue to unfold. I am so delighted to be alongside a gentleman that is applying a full court press with USA Today and their coverage of this year's NBA playoffs. He's doing a great job, and it's always a pleasure to welcome in the senior NBA writer for Hoopsworld, Bill Ingram, and also the author of his brand new book. And we're going to talk about that here momentarily. Welcome aboard.
Thanks. We've certainly done our share of time in this building together and suffering through some hard times and some good times, but it's always exciting to talk the NBA, even when the Dallas Mavericks are not involved.
And that is unfortunate, but we're going to have some fun here today. We're going to do a little bit of a Q&A on so many of this series and how they continue to unfold. The first one at hand, let's talk about San Antonio and the Golden State Warriors. I think it's surprised a lot of folks. This has had and featured 3 overtime series, youth versus a veteran club. What intrigues you the most about this particular series?
Well, I think, you know, when you talk about the Golden State Warriors, it's a team that hasn't been this far in the playoffs since 1978, and to me that's exciting. Whether or not you're a fan of the Warriors or just a fan of the game, it's great to have new blood. I really like to see someone like Steph Curry, who is so overlooked and who sat in the visitors' locker room here right after the All-Star picks were made, the coaches' picks, and he was not chosen, and told me he took it personally. A lot of times guys will say, you know, it would have been nice, but we're focused on, but Steph didn't play that. He actually said, people are going to see that this was a mistake. And so to see him deliver on that, to see Klay Thompson play incredibly well in a role where, you know, some injuries created a bigger role for him and he's flourished, to see Carl Landry, who's been kind of passed from team to team to team, really finding a home here. David Lee's had an outstanding year, obviously injured for the playoffs for the most part, but it's a great team. You know, it's fun to watch them. Now, can they take out the San Antonio Spurs? You know, when the Spurs are healthy, even though they're not the knockdown, drag-out defensive team they've been for 15 years, they're still a very veteran, very savvy team, and I believe that when it comes down to having to win in San Antonio, that's going to be a tall order. I think the Spurs are still going to come out ahead, but the Warriors have had a really nice offseason.
Of course, they're led by their head coach, Greg Popovich, but let's expound and talk some more about number 30, Stephen Curry, because he has really been incredible. The resiliency that he showed on Mother's Day, coming back from that left ankle sprain, was really remarkable, and he inspired his team to win.
Well, that's Steph. I mean, Steph is not somebody that's going to take a play off. We've seen Dirk Nowitzki do this many times where the diagnosis is, oh, he's out 6 to 8 weeks and he's back the next game. Just tape it up a little more. And that's what, you know, on Sunday morning, the stories were, what can the Warriors do without Steph? And then he went out there and played well. So I think in order to win a championship, in order to have postseason success, you have to have another place that you go to. If you're a player, you have to be able, you know, you have to be able to turn off the pain receptors in your brain. Because by the time you get to this point of the season, most players are banged up, unless your name is LeBron James. Everybody else is banged up. And you just have to fight to overcome that. And Steph is showing the kind of leadership that you hope. He's shown the ability and the talent. Now the leadership is the key to being a franchise player. And Steph is showing the whole package right now.
Do you agree with head coach Mark Jackson? He made a profound statement saying that his trio, his backcourt, was perhaps the best shooting backcourt of all time in the NBA?
Well, now, all time, you start to get into some pretty, I mean, Reggie Miller was,
I want you to weigh in on that.
Ray Allen and Gary Payton. You've had some guys that were pretty, I don't know, that's tough. That's tough. I don't think we're quite there. You know, Steph Curry is one of the great three-point shooters for sure, but anytime you talk about something that's going on right now, everybody, oh, LeBron James is the greatest player of all time. I had a chat question this week where somebody said, is Dwayne Wade now a top 10 player of all time? And I'm like, God, the problem with trying to say all time is you've got, I mean, Oscar Robertson, you have Oscar Robertson averaged a triple-double for an entire season. Now, if a guy does it 3 or 4 times, wow, that was LeBron's 4th triple-double. Woohoo! But he averaged a triple-double for an entire season. You know, Wilt Chamberlain had 100 points in a game. When you talk about all-time greats, you're talking about Magic Johnson. Larry, how about Magic Johnson and Byron Scott? That's a pretty good three-point shooting backcourt. You know, when you start talking all-time, you run into the issue of there have been so many amazing players, and Mark Jackson should know this. He played against some of those guys. So no, I wouldn't go there, but I can appreciate that what he's trying to do is send the message to his team just how much faith and confidence he has in them, and that approach that he's had has worked very well to this point. So good for you, Mark, but there's been a lot of great players over the years.
Well, I have to admit, I do remember those playing days of Mark Jackson. 17 years as an NBA point guard. He was the Rookie of the Year in 1988. I think one thing, Bill, that we can definitely agree on is that Mark Jackson has done a remarkable job this year, and he very well could have even been Coach of the Year in the NBA.
Well, he was a strong candidate, and I got to say, Keith Smart is a friend of mine too. And in his defense, they were asking him to transform the team into a defensive team. But they didn't give him the pieces to do that. And so it's important to note that when they hired Mark Jackson, they also revamped the team with some defensive players. Andrew Bogut being number one. You trade Monte Ellis, you get Andrew Bogut, and now that he's healthy, you're seeing, I mean, this team is not the same Warriors team that was under Keith Smart that Mark Jackson took over. They put a new coach in, but they also brought in the players to change that culture into a defensive culture. And those two factors, I mean, Mark's done a great job, but it is those two factors, management as well as coaching, that has brought about this radical change in that franchise.
I am so glad, Bill, you bring up Andrew Bogut, because I really believe that in this particular matchup, he has been the X factor in my mind. They're missing the, the dominance of David. I mean, 18 and 10, he provided that all season long, and how Andrew has stepped up and he's providing double-digit rebounding, and he didn't do that in the regular season. That really says something about the heart that he's bringing night in and night out.
Well, it does, and what you have to realize, Andrew Bogut has not been healthy all year. And so he's been battling injury. He didn't play a lot of games, and then he even admitted that he was considering retirement for a while because it has been such a persistent situation. And to see him, the healthier he gets, the better they are. I mean, the Milwaukee Bucks were very, very good when Andrew Bogut was healthy. Just the issue was he was never healthy. So to see him now getting healthier and able to contribute the way that, I mean, when Andrew Bogut is healthy, he's a top 5 NBA center. And I think we forget that because there are so many times where he's not healthy and we haven't seen him consistently for quite some time. And it's easy to then forget. But once he gets really healthy, we're going to see this team is, there's something else when he's at full speed.
Well, you still are very optimistic in terms of what San Antonio may be able to accomplish. How are they going to get it done?
Well, I'm a big believer in veteran savvy. The exact right decision at the exact right time. Now, the Spurs did not do that in the last game where they lost in overtime, where they had the lead. Normally, San Antonio is not a team that gives up a lead, but they gave up the lead and wound up losing. I mean, the Warriors just took it away from them in overtime. But, this is a team I don't think they're going to allow that to happen again. And with the Spurs, it's them allowing it. It's not so much the Warriors doing it to them. The Spurs were making some mistakes down the stretch, and that's why the Warriors came back. And, there's no coach in the league better than Greg Popovich. He's been the best coach in the league for a long, long time. And I know that the kind of adjustments that they're going to make and just where they're going to be mentally as they get back to San Antonio, the Warriors to win this series, have to take 2 out of 3 in San Antonio. And the way that crowd's going to be and as focused as that team's going to be, they understand more than anyone else that Tim Duncan doesn't have too many more shots at this. Yeah. And they can't afford to waste this one.
I've heard it over and over again, everyone giving high praise to Coach Popovich and how effective he is as a coach. What makes him so special? He's
said it many times, and it's exactly right. It's that his superstar allows him to coach the team. Mm-hmm. Tim Duncan if he has a disagreement with Pop, you'd never know. He's not someone that gets upset or we've seen in the Brooklyn-Chicago series, the Nets were Gerald Wallace, I don't know what my role is on this team. Like, really? You're in the playoffs and you don't know what your role is on the team? Wow. You never see that from San Antonio because there is a mindset, a culture that has set in, that it is San Antonio culture. And if you are not willing to be a part of that culture, which is selflessness, it's team first, it's whatever coach asks for, and then some. Steven Jackson had a problem with that late in the season, and what happened? See you later. Tracy McGrady came in. So I think the importance of having the ability to establish that culture, which not every coach has that liberty, because you're so dependent upon the star buying in. And in an era where stars don't necessarily buy in, Carmelo Anthony, LeBron James, these are guys that have caused big changes within franchises over the years and changes for themselves from one franchise to another as a result. Greg Popovich has established a culture. His guys play within it, and the key guys, Tim Duncan, Manu Ginobili, Tony Parker, never question. And that's the power that he has, that situation. That's why they have been so good for so long.
Very well said. Well, let's transition now. Let's talk about the Oklahoma City Thunder and the Memphis Grizzlies. This has certainly been a very dynamic series, to say the least. But the one thing, my takeaway, is that OKC has had to forge a new identity. I mean, they are depleted. They're vulnerable. They've had to compensate in many different areas. And I think they're going to value Russell Westbrook a whole lot more going into next year.
I think they already did, but there are two factors. One, you're right, the adjustment. Somebody has to pick up a lot of points because Russell Westbrook drops 30 on a regular basis, and without that, they've struggled to score. Because Kevin Durant, as the Rockets showed, which was obviously they lost Russ, they had no adjustment time, and then the Rockets were just zoning Kevin and keeping him from getting the ball, and no one else was scoring the ball, so they struggled in the first round. Now we're seeing in the second round that the Thunder have started to make some adjustments. Reggie Jackson's playing great. Kevin Martin has started to, he was horrible in the first round, has started to step up a little bit now. Serge Ibaka is hitting his jumper and giving some points. The adjustment period is starting to set in. If they only had practice time and training camp to go through, as it is, they're going to have a lot of time this summer to think about it. But the other factor is the move that Sam Presti made when he decided that he was not going to play out the year with James Harden, that he was not going to allow James Harden to be the story every night, because, media is, what we tend to do is the low-hanging fruit would be every night, what's going to happen with James Harden? What's going to happen with James Harden? What's going to happen with James Harden? And it wouldn't have been about the Thunder. And Sam Presti, their GM, wants every night to be about the game and the team on the court and not about external stuff. So number one, he knew he couldn't afford to give Harden that kind of money that Houston gave him because of the market size and the new collective bargaining agreement. And number two, losing Russell Westbrook. I mean, those two things will be the reason the Thunder are going to lose in the second round instead of being back in the NBA Finals.
Not to get off track too much, but James Harden, I mean, how he made that seamless transition, in my mind, perhaps he was the most improved player in the league this year. He posted incredible all-star numbers.
He did. The problem that you have is that Houston ran almost exclusively, you give the ball to James, he puts his head down and barrels his way to the basket with that little Euro step, which I kept waiting for it to be called the travel, but apparently that's not a travel. I can understand if it's Kobe and it's not a travel, and LeBron never travels, but James Harden, young player, that's already not, okay. So I think as much as that helped them, it also hurt them, because you had a lot of guys kind of disgruntled about how, well, we're just going to all stand around and watch him go to the hole and wonder if he's going to pass it. And if a team was able to stop Harden, which the Thunder did, then they didn't really know what to do. Jeremy Lin had an okay season. He's an okay player. There's a lot of hype around him. But Jeremy Lin's a 14-6 player. He's a very good backup point guard. You're starting him. Then you have really no one at power forward, kind of a rotation going on, and they made a trade midseason and some uncertainty there. Then Omer Asik, who's not going to hurt you if you just give him the ball and ask him to create, but feeds well off of cuts and back cuts and, passes for dunks. So James Harden kind of had a situation where it was go out and score, and he did that. But now if you're going to ask that team to take it to the next level, James is going to have to learn how to share the ball, not just assist, that's you drive and you dish it at the last minute, but actually set up plays and run something. I mean, that's going to be a challenge for him to not just score points, but really be a winner. There's a difference, and he's going to have to learn how to do that.